Bismillah walhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillahi. I wanted to make a brief note on the issue of the wali in the marital contract. And I wanted to note that there's a number of conditions. I'm not going to go into all the details here because that's not the nature of this session. I just wanted to point out some very important points because there's some confusion. There's some confusion with regard to certain issues that pertain to the marital contract. And really, for this discussion in detail is really in the context of a class setting. We have a hadith that is a principle that knows la nikah illa bil wali. There's no marriage except with the wali. Some people would immediately say, well, what about the Hanafi madhab? And this is why I'm making this live. Then I say, and myself too, yeah, what about the Hanafi madhab? Even Hanafis themselves, I was just reading a fatwa from a fatwa bank from a mufti who said that a mature girl, we should say mature woman, because when we start, there's some important points that need to be mentioned on that. For instance, the issue of what are we talking about? Like when we talk about issues of deen, we need to be very careful. Like because we have teenagers in our community and we want them to be where they need to be. Because there's maturity, biological maturity, and then there's maturity at the level of intellect and emotion. Yes, we have vulnerable youth. What was disturbing is that it said a mature girl can marry without the consent of the wali. That's not true. And the Hanafi madhab, one of my teachers, Sheikh Dr. Ahmed Sabalik, from the scholars of Al-Azhar, one of the ulama of Usul al-Fiqh, he even screamed this from the minbar. He screamed this point from the minbar. He said, people, to this extent, stop lying on the Hanafi madhab. I'll mention this in brief. The Hanafi madhab does not say that it's allowable to marry without a wali. Be careful what you're saying. Listen to what I'm going to say. The Hanafi madhab says, in its appropriate presentation, the Hanafi madhab says that the role of the wali is to determine compatibility as a principle. There's other roles as well, but on this issue, the role of the wali is to determine compatibility. And so when we're talking about compatibility, al-kafa, there's a number of debates people in the madhab about this stuff. I was just talking to one of my brothers who's a scholar in Islam, and about this point, the contradictions that we find. Compatibility, we have to look at it from a number of different perspectives, people. Some of the madhab, in their opinions, they say compatibility in lineage. Sheikh Ibn Baz was saying that there's no such requirement. So there's a contradiction about what compatibility is. That's why you can't just take your opinions from books. You need leadership in the community which is guiding the process. because one group will say it has to be from this group, ethnic group, and the other one will say no. So it creates confusion. But aside from that, I'm just getting to the point so people understand how to navigate fiqh. We have to even come to a determination, and it's not that it's unclear, it's just that everyone is not qualified to talk about these subjects. It's, that there's debate amongst the scholars is not the problem. The problem is that everyone is not qualified to deal with these issues in the community. It doesn't matter if you studied a little bit this and that. Like the Mufti is going around saying that the compatibility, compatibility has a number of different categories. And in our time period, one of the factors of compatibility was the extremely important people is the issue of personality, is the issue of where people were at psychologically. It's not just the issue of economics, although economics has its importance. It's not just the issue that you come from the same tribe or you don't come from the same tribe. That's shallow stuff. You understand what I'm saying? It has an impact. Don't tell me, we're not going to say that it doesn't have an impact, because if there's two different cultures and they clash, it'll have an impact. So people have to be ready to go into that relationship understanding that they're going to have challenges. That's why we say, based on principles in deen, al-ilmu qabla al-qawl wal-amal, as a concept, that knowledge takes precedent to speaking and acting. And so we have to do marital counseling. We have to do marital education even, because counseling is not enough. People don't know what they're doing. If we want to have certain degrees of success, we have to be able to prepare people from an early age to go into marriage, because it's all over the place now. But that's not true. The Hanafi madhab doesn't say that a woman can marry without a wali. The Hanafi madhab says that the Quranic concept of the wali, the aim of it is to establish compatibility. So that woman has to be able to determine that she is at that level that she can go at it. But she can go at it alone. But I will say this. When you marry without a wali, one of the difficulties that you're going to encounter is that if there's conflicts or problems in the marriage, who do you go to? Because the concept of the wali is guardianship and guidance and support that's supposed to come from the family people. This is why personally I'm against the idea that's in Hanbali fiqh that if there's a woman that's under your care and you're the wali, that you can marry her. I think that's a conflict of interest. I don't think that that's an opinion that we should be practicing in this country. You understand what I'm saying? Because you have too many sisters that are vulnerable. You have too many sisters that are on their own. You have too many sisters that come from backgrounds that are problematic, and you have too many instances where they're being taken advantage of. The wali should be there as a family member. So we should know what opinions. That's not to say that that's a bad opinion. It's to say that that opinion is not working in our context, right? And just like the opinion of a woman being able to marry without a wali can work in our context, but with conditions, because you have sisters that don't have a wali. And the reality of the situation, we can't just say, well, the community, this and that, because the reality at the end of the day is the community is not worth 25 cents sometimes. I love the community. I fight for the community. I sacrifice for the community. But now we're talking about someone's individual life. And so when you start talking about the community being there, that's why I'm always pushing for community and community building, because I know how much the community is not there. Now, individuals in the community, we have individuals in our community that are awesome people, that they're stand-up people. Ala ayn wa ras. They're there. They're there. Recently, I had a situation where I needed to handle something in another state. I picked up the phone call, picked up one of the brothers. He said, what do you want me to do? You understand? They're there. I myself, even having a community role, I fail people. So we can't just say the community will be the wali by itself unless somebody's actually going to take that responsibility in full, understanding it, and we have an understanding what that person is doing. So we have people, this is why, this is the upset point that I have, because I'm upset about this. In general, This is why we need qualified leadership in the community. Because you have people saying whatever like that. That's not appropriate. It isn't appropriate. Really, it isn't. It puts too many people into a jam. Now, a sister goes and gets married without a wali. Now, who's going to support her when everything hits the fan? Who does she go to? And that's what I'm saying. I asked this question before. Very few people answered. Who is the leadership in the Muslim community? We have some statistics that say that some of the people in the mosque communities are saying that it's the president of the masjid. So is the president of the masjid going to take responsibility? The president of the masjid barely takes responsibility for anything. He just likes to dictate and designate, and nothing gets done of no resolution of community problems. So we shouldn't say that type of stuff because that's not true about the Hanafi madhab. The Hanafi madhab is stringent in saying that condition needs to be met, and if there's an actual biological wali, it says, that person should be, that the wali, if there's no, if a sister marries without wali and there's a biological wali, that the wali has the right to call for a divorce because there's no compatibility out of protecting her. Because the issue of compatibility is so there's protection for the sister. And we've gotten to a point where this stuff is so loose that it's all over the place. You understand what I'm saying? We need a certain degree of looseness, but it's so loose, it's just there's no foundation. There's no foundation. And this is a serious issue. Yes, and we don't want to open the door to create situations for people in which the conditions are problematic, that they lead to exploitation and all of that type of stuff. We already have a problem with addressing domestic violence in the community. You understand what I'm saying? We have a serious problem with addressing those types of issues, and at the same time, what we're doing is leaving the whole family structure up for the taking, right? There's nobody that wants to come in, nobody that can intervene. And let me tell you something, when it gets to the point of domestic violence, not even the police want to intervene. Many times they don't want to intervene. I've dealt with many cases like that in social services. They don't want to intervene because it's messy. It's a messy situation. So we have to do things in the right way, people. We have to do things in the right way. She should be able to determine if there's someone compatible for her or not. The compatibility has to be there. And like I said, people, and I'm trying to do work on this, I'm not satisfied with what I'm seeing in the fiqh books because a lot of it is not mature. You understand what I'm saying? We need to start talking about compatibility at the level of personality and emotional intelligence and all of that type of stuff. That needs to be seen because a lot of people may have money. They may have the same cultural background. They may have education. They may like to kick it, but then they're terrible emotionally and at other levels. And after a while, when all the things fade out, when all the dreaming about, I'm going to get a mahar for this amount, we're going to have this type of lifestyle, when all of that fades out, then all of a sudden there's a worry situation. I'll never forget, and I'm closing this live with this example. There was a sister. She was actually from Southeast Asia. She had contacted me, and her husband was supposed to talk to me. He's a professional. They were moneyed. They had money. I went to the area where they used to live. Like, you're not talking about 1,500 square foot home. You understand what I'm saying? You're talking about maybe 2,500, 3,000, mashallah, in an area that's extremely expensive to live in the state that I was in, right? And so they refused to talk to me at one point in time. So it came back to me on a number of different occasions. Come to find out, there was domestic violence, there was other issues, abuse and all this. She had fell out with her family, right? Southeast Asian community. She fell out with her family and had married the brother. He was from the same background. And so, come to dig deeper, she was a professional herself. She wasn't just, a sister who was stuck in the situation because she didn't have a background in education and she married the brother as her ticket out. No, no, no. And it's not to belittle sisters that are stay-at-home mothers, because that's more difficult than sometimes being in the workplace. But she had given up her career, so she felt as though she was stuck and she didn't have any support. It got to the point where I had to arrange with some good people in the community that were doing some work for families her exit from the house. So that means she now is going from an expensive house. You understand what I'm saying? Where there's space, where there's vehicles, where there's this, that, and she's starting from zero because she hasn't been in her field. And you know what type of jump? It took her a while to make that jump, and she called me and she finally said, I'm ready now. And she made the jump. I'm giving this example to say that of the things were mentioned, most of the stuff had to do with emotional health and emotional abuse and even some physical violence and all of that type of stuff. But people, money by itself doesn't mean that we're compatible with each other, people. You understand what I'm saying? And a lot of us have that confused. We haven't developed at that level which will make successful relationships. There's not much to say about that. I want you to contemplate that, that example that I just gave, where they have everything economically. There's no need. As a matter of fact, they have more than most people in the world, and it still didn't work. You understand what I'm saying? And it got nasty. So compatibility has to be looked at very carefully. And I apologize, people, because some of us that are dealing with Islamic knowledge versus addressing issues that we need to address, we're over here creating scandals and problems and this and that. And this is the issue that we need to work on. We need to hit deeper studies, right, on the issue of compatibility, and then create educational environments, because I don't even want to say a seminar or a workshop, because that's not enough. You understand what I'm saying? This has to be from early on in how we're raising our children and what standards we have from each other and how we build relationships, people. You can't build this is not like let me go to this DIY seminar to figure out how to do marriage. This is not that you sit in 10 sessions, a certificate, and it tells you how to do marriage. You see what I'm saying? This is a big issue. We need to be groomed in that from early on, and our community has to have standards, which we don't. I'm talking about in terms of how to relate to each other. The standards that we have, people, are about how much money do people make, what kind of background. And that's only a portion of compatibility, people. That's not the whole ticket. You understand what I'm saying? Because your whole economic situation can collapse. You can go through war, you can go through job loss, this, that, and then where are the emotional tools? Where are the other tools that are necessary to maintain a relationship? If the only thing that you have going for you is that there's, a six-figure salary or a high five-figure salary or in the millions and this and that, if that's the only thing that you have going for you, where does that go? We're seeing that, not work for a lot of people. You see what I'm saying? So I'm not saying we shouldn't focus on economics, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't focus on education. Don't misunderstand me. I'm saying that we're missing a key factor, and that's how to relate to each other as human beings and understand how to construct a relationship. And that's not going to be solved just with premarital counseling, right? That goes back all the way to the way that we're raising our children. That goes back to the standards that we have for ourselves as a community. That goes back to how we orient ourselves as Muslims. We're never going to resolve this issue just with a seminar. That's why domestic violence, and I definitely want to end on this point because I got a little long with it, but domestic violence counseling, when it comes from the court, that's not going to solve anything. That's just a moneymaker. When a lot of times when domestic violence takes place and court gets involved, say go take some classes. If it's embedded in the person, you understand what I'm saying? That person needs time to transform. It's not going to be resolved in a few classes. That means that you got to get to the core of why that stuff is happening in order to really change the dynamics. And then for some people, it may not change. That just may be where they're at psychologically and mentally and everything like that, and they're not going to change. I'm saying this to say that people, this stuff is not solved with just saying, let's have a workshop. You see what I mean? It's not solved like that. And I'm sad that this is taking place like this. We're not doing our job. And that's why I keep emphasizing that we need to invest in leadership, because that leadership has to be free to be able to educate, to be able to research, to be able to communicate. When you have all these professionals that don't know what they're doing and they think they're leading the community, we get what we get. You understand what I'm saying? And they're making organization of certain events in the masjid the leadership in the community, and that's not leadership. That's management. You understand what I mean? And so at the end of the day, people, we have to work. Yep, it's work, right? The therapy has to be integral into our religion. And we even when it comes to that point, we're saying, people are saying, why should I do therapy? Why should I do this? Why should I do that? And we have serious issues. We have serious issues. So the conversation continues, people, but the Hanafi madhab does not say that a woman can get married without a wali. The Hanafi madhab says that a woman has to prove that the person that she's picking as her spouse is compatible with her. She has to make sure that that condition of compatibility is fulfilled to fulfill the role of the wali. And if that's not fulfilled, it's a problem, right? And that's why the contract can be broken, because the condition of compatibility is one of the conditions of an Islamic marital contract, that there has to be compatibility. And we have to make sure that we understand compatibility, and that's for another live, because like I said, what we're saying compatibility is not making the grade. You understand what I'm saying? We're looking at geography, culture, wealth, and we're not looking at personality. We're not looking at psychology. We're not looking at background and what people have been through. We're not looking to see if the families can match or if there's going to be too much or what kind of problems. So what we're doing is we're setting up our people, including our youth, for failure. Please, people, don't say that the Hanafi madhab says you can marry without a wali. Say that the Hanafi madhab says that it's allowable to marry without a wali for a woman who can demonstrate that her and her partner have compatibility. Therein, she meets the qualifications of the wali. But the reality at the end of the day, like I mentioned, is not a good idea, because you have to have someone that's designated to be your support when everything hits the fan. If you go into a marriage and there's no one that you can call back to, there's no one that can stand there with you, you're not going to be able to work through issues. What is your support, right? The whole issue of the question, what is your opinion with older converts needing a wali? I think it's truly needed, but it's hard to find anyone willing to be a wali for revert sisters. That's true. And that's a population of sisters that are very vulnerable. And there's people that prey on those sisters because they know that they can they can deal with that sister pretty much any way that they want, because she's on her own and she doesn't have a family that will intervene. And part of the dilemma is when you start saying that okay, well, the Imam of the Masjid can be the wali. Part of the dilemma is that there has to be a contract. Like, the Imam has to have a no conflict. He has to have a conflict of interest policy, where he is literally the sister's wali, not potentially thinking to marry her. Because in some schools of fiqh, that's there. No, it's not predators, because it can be a predator. It can be a predator, but it's not always a predator. Is that in some schools of fiqh, it's allowable. You understand what I'm saying? Like in the Hanbali madhab, that's allowable, and it's not necessary that he may be a predator. Now, there could be a predator which uses that role. But we want to separate between that, the predator role, and we want to separate between what's allowable in some schools of fiqh, and we want to say, no, the wali should act exactly as the wali is supposed to be. Someone that is like is a family member, like the father, the brothers, the uncles. There's a series of people who are designated by Islam as the walis. They are the same people that the person inherits from, and so on and so forth. But if someone is going to fulfill that role, then the first thing is that they shouldn't. If a non-family member is going to do that, fulfill that role because there's no one there, if you're going to pick someone, it should be clear that there's no marriage between you and that person, right? That's the first thing. The second thing is that person should be there for more often than just the event of the marital contract, because you're going to need that person to support you when problems occur or when issues occur in the marriage. See what I'm saying? And so either we develop a system, which we have failed to do in many ways, or we have to reform our institutions, right? We have to reform our institutions, and I think, like I said, the conflict of interest has to be there. Policy has to be there. Or the no conflict of interest. There has to be the understanding of what is that role. There has to be longevity of the position, right? And that's why sometimes if a family adopts a revert in that regard, is good. Another thing is that you should never eliminate your family for the most part. And reverts do that quite often because the Muslims go in and they tell them, no, your family can still be a support. But if you have someone, like, say, for instance, if I were to step in with your father or with your uncle, then there could be some sort of shorter, and still the fulfillment will be there and the family support is there, because at the end of the day, if something happens to that sister, where's she going to go? You see what I'm saying? So we shouldn't be cutting people off of their families. We shouldn't be cutting people off of their families, which is what many Muslims, how they start communicating Islam to the new Muslim, which is erroneous, because Islam doesn't say cut off your ties from your Muslim family. And so a lot of Muslims don't know what they're talking about in that regard, and to how to resolve these issues, right? And to how to resolve that issue. So it needs some revisiting. It shouldn't be, I was just reading one of the other comments. But people too is like, I'm gonna be honest with you people, and because this issue was brought up. If you have trauma in your life, or if you have overcome trauma in your life, those are two different scenarios and two different situations. Then you should have a support system, which is understanding of what's going on and understanding of how to help you and support you move forward and walk with you. But when there's too many sisters, and I'm here because mostly everybody that is responding are sisters here, that go into situations knowing that they have some background, and it doesn't necessarily have to mean converts. It's a number of sisters from different backgrounds. You understand what I'm saying? They have issues, maybe they had issues in their past, this and that, and they jump into marriages, and they don't look at compatibility. You got to look at whether you can deal with the person, or whether the person is going to end up triggering you. You see what I'm saying? If you yourself know that you survived XYZ, or if you yourself know that I'm struggling with XYZ, mental health, sexual abuse, abandonment issues, all of that, abandonment issues, mental health, sexual abuse, any sort of trauma, mistrust, all of that, and you're jumping into a relationship without determining compatibility for dealing with that type of stuff, then you're setting yourself up for just hurting yourself even more, and sharing that hurt with other people that probably themselves have been hurt. That's why I said compatibility. You understand what I'm saying? Has to be looked at more than just what we find at the basic level in the fiqh books. And I have been looking in the fiqh books. You understand what I'm saying? I have been looking in the fiqh books, and it's not satisfying. So it requires to go deeper into the fiqh book. It requires to do much more deeper research. But what's standard, what you're seeing on a standard basis, we have thousands and thousands of research in Islamic fiqh. But sometimes we're not accessing accessing the research at a higher level, because what's common ground is what's common ground. And so we have to, and what's popular. So we have to go deeper and to really extract, like I said, more deep concepts of compatibility. And there needs to be some standards, that we're operating from, right? There's a lot of stuff that comes into that. Imagine if the brother has the mindset that he wants to get into polygamy, and he has the mindset of saying, well, I believe that it is allowable for the Muslim man, which in some opinions in fiqh it is. I'm not saying I promote it or that we should practice it, but we have to know that there's an opinion out there that he can marry 1, 2, 3, 4 without telling the wives. Now imagine if you have abandonment issues. Imagine if you have abandonment issues, if you have trust issues. It doesn't necessarily have to be from a marriage. It can be from what happened with your parents. And you go into a relationship and you married this brother thinking he's your Prince Charming, and then all of a sudden you find out that he married somebody without telling you. Imagine where you land. And that is an issue on compatibility. You see what I'm saying? Or imagine if a brother marries a sister and doesn't know that that sister has autism, and he's trying to communicate with that sister, and there's no empathy, no compassion, and nobody told him that there is autistic tendencies that person has. And so he's trying to figure out, like, why aren't we connecting on this emotional level? It's not that it's a problem that she has autism. It's a problem that when it came to the issue of compatibility, you understand what I'm saying, to see if he can work with that situation, he wasn't even given the choice to even understand it. Or imagine if she has a background as a refugee and all kind of stuff happened. Rape, she may have saw killing, this, all that, and then the person is marrying and doesn't even know. Or the person has a mental health issue, and the person doesn't know. You know what I'm saying? Schizophrenia, all kind of issues, which later on, anxiety, you know what I'm saying? All kind of issues. So that's why I say compatibility, people. You know what I'm saying? Compatibility also is not just a checklist. Some people have 100 questions. I've looked at those. I've even tried to fill those types of things out. And I think that at the end of the day, if people think that what's on those questions is going to give you an understanding of what you're dealing with, no, it's just going to open up a door. But you have to take the time and put in the work to determine if compatibility is there. So why would you do that by yourself? Why would you make yourself emotionally vulnerable into that situation when you need to have objective eyes, or eyes that are in your best interest backing you up? Why would you jump into a situation that you don't even know if you're ready to work with or not? So I'm leaving it at this note. I went further than where I wanted to go, but compatibility is important. It's part of the function of the wali to determine compatibility, and it is a condition of the marital contract, right? And compatibility shouldn't be, there's some things passed off as compatibility that are not necessarily a condition. Like having the same cultural background is not necessarily a condition for the marital contract, but compatibility is. See what I'm saying? And we need to create these discussions that create the culture of understanding of how we can move forward. It's not going to be a perfect situation, it's work. Until next time, assalamu alaikum.